Welcome back to the farm for another project, guys. If this is your first time, I hope you enjoy. We're kind of finish up with the chores and all of our morning love with all the critters here this morning, and I'm pretty excited for what we're gonna be working on today because yesterday I had a great big package show up, so we're getting ready to expand the business a little bit. So let's head inside the shop, show you what showed up, and let's get started. So I started my little woodworking business with the Onefinity Woodworker X50. And one reason that I picked the Onefinity is it showed that down the road, if I wanted to upgrade, I could actually upgrade to the Journeyman and only have to pay the difference for the new Z-axis. So yesterday, I had one actually show up in the mail because thanks to everybody's support, I haven't been able to upgrade some of the tools here over the past year of having my business. And yesterday, this package showed up. So now we're gonna be able to change from my Woodworker X50 up to the Journeyman, and let me show you the real size difference here. Okay, so here's my Woodworker X50. Now I absolutely love this machine. I can't rant and rave about it, but good enough. I mean, really, these machines are just incredible. One thing I really liked about Onefinity that really made me want to stick with the Onefinity is they did also offer an upgrade down the road to the Journeyman for the Z-axis. So now I'm able to go from a 32-inch workspace to a 48-inch workspace, which is just awesome how much more doors is going to open for me. But at the time, I wasn't sure how well or successful the business was going to be. So spending $4,000 for a machine versus $2,500 for a machine, this one was a little bit easier for me to kind of convince my wife to say, you know what, let's try this out and see how it goes. The other thing I really like about Onefinity is that this Z-axis isn't going to go to waste. They will actually send it to, I believe it's called Makerspace, which caters to people that may not have a machine, giving them access to a machine. That include like veterans and school programs. So once I get this machine all sent over, I'm going to send that back in. They're going to go through and clean it all up, refurbish it, and it's not going to go to waste. It's going to go to somebody to get some good use, which to me, that is just awesome. That's a huge selling point for going Onefinity, at least in my opinion, is that you can upgrade the machine, and somebody who may not be able to have a machine is going to be able to use your axis. So one thing to consider if you're buying a CNC. Now continuing on here, you can see I just bought a Craig bench just so I can kind of get this thing started, but I'm also going to try adding a vertical table to this because I do a lot of joinery, I do a lot of custom woodworking, and I want to kind of play with some custom joinery. So hopefully I can line this machine up perfect with this. Might take a little bit of shimming to get it to work, but I think having a vertical table is really going to add a whole nother level of custom work that I'm going to be able to offer. So let's get this machine taken off here, get everything moved over here, and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is get the old machine taken apart. So I'm gonna unplug everything, just get everything out of the way. Then we'll go ahead and remove the router. We'll get everything taken off here. Then we're gonna move both of the XY axes off. We'll shift those over there. And then we're gonna go ahead and install the new axis, but we're gonna do a little different clamping system on that table. So we'll talk about when they get over there. So let's get this thing taken apart and let's get moving on. Okay, so in the box with this upgrade, I've got this little piece of paperwork here for changing the size of the machine, which we'll walk through here in just a second. We've got a packing slip to ship the old one back, and we have a longer Y-axis cable that goes over the corner. So let's get this wired up really quick, and let's give the machine a Z, and then we'll get everything bolted down. Okay, so now we're going to plug in all the settings here. So we click the little tab up here, go to the motors, go to 0. So we are the X-axis. 2.8 amps, we got 16, so max velocity is going to be 1,000. Max acceleration shows, now we're in G-force, so we are 21.244, max jerk 28.33. We have the step angle, .8, and then we have the bottom one here, so revs per travel, change from 10, Okay, so I just changed everything in the controller. I just reset it. So we're gonna go ahead and move this all the way back. Make sure that we're lined up perfectly square, and then we'll put a couple of screws back in there. Not all the way down, just to hold it in place. Then we're gonna bring it all the way forward and do the same thing here in the front. Okay, so there we are, all the way in the back. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get a couple of set screws in there, and then we'll drag the whole thing forward. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it all the way forward, and we're gonna check to make sure that we're bottoming out on both sides, and then we'll put one set screw on the front, and then run it all the way back just to double check it. And then once we know that everything's in there perfect, then we'll go ahead and we'll put all the screws down and cinch it all down, and then we'll start working on the wasteboard. Okay, now before we finish this up, we're gonna go ahead and do all of our maintenance. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna clean every one of the rails. We're gonna blow air and kind of clean out all these little pockets. Then we're gonna come through and we're gonna grease all the bearings, get everything done here. And we'll clean off everything on the Z-axis. So we'll just get everything all clean and all lubed. So that way when we put the machine on here, and once we level this, then we're gonna come back and we're gonna trim the machine, and then we're gonna start carbon. Okay, so for doing this on the Z-axis, we're just gonna add some oil right here to this upper bearing. We're just going to put a little bit on these risers here. And then we're just going to run this machine up and down a couple of times. Let that oil really get down in there. I'm going to add just a little bit more to the screw here as it comes down. Now I'm doing all this before I have my spoil board. If my spoil board was on here, because you don't want to get any oil on any of your OSB, I would put down a pad underneath it. That's why we're doing this ahead of time. Perfect. So now the Z is moving nice and smooth. Everything's nice and clean. Now obviously you don't want to leave a ton of excess oil on here, because that's just going to kind of do more damage than good, because then all the sawdust and everything's going to stick to it. So we're just going to wipe down a little bit of the excess off. Make sure everything's all nice and clean. Make sure she's still moving nice and freely, because the last thing we want is any of that excess to drip down on our OSB once we get it on here. Alright, now we're moving nice and smooth, and we'll move on to the next one. Alright, so now if you look on this rail here, we got another sealed bearing here, and this one actually has a port that you can pull off. You can actually put some oil down in there. So we're going to go ahead and add some oil to this, just till we see everything kind of squeezing out through there. Now we're going to tighten that back up. Now I'm going to run just a little bit of oil down each of these rails. And then we're going to run this machine through its limits all the way forward, all the way back. And then just like the smaller one, we're going to make sure that we wipe off any of our excess. Perfect. Now we'll go ahead and finish up the other side, and then we'll start working on the spoil board. Alright, so the main part of this is going to be the same type of spoil board that I used before. So normally what I'll do is I actually just use the inside of this leg and the inside of that leg as my straight edge, because I know these are perfectly square because the machine lines up on it. So I'm going to put one T-track there on both ends, and then I'm going to measure out and figure out how far spaced I want to put the T-tracks, and then we'll kind of work on putting the spoil board in and figure out what we're going to do for the new one. So I'm going to use a large drywall square here. I just stand it up on end so you know it's 1 inch thick. And then I'm just going to butt that right up against front to back. And then I'm going to take one of these T-tracks. And that's where I'm going to line up my T-track. Now I like to put my T-tracks where it's essentially kind of right in the dead center from front to back between these two rails. Now once you get the first one lined up, it's easy to line all the other ones up afterwards. So I'm just going to kind of line this out about where I think I want it, which is right about there. And then I'm going to use this little guide here. I bought this little, it's got a guide and a pre-hole bit. This is just a Ryobi one. I think I got it at one of the big box stores. But as you press it down, make sure you're nice and straight up and down so that we're not tweaking or bending anything on this metal. So let's get a couple of screws set in this one, and then we'll go ahead and get the first piece of OSB cut, and then we'll just continue all the way along here and we'll get this board all built. I played with a couple different layouts, and I think this is the one that I'm going to stick with. I stuck with the same thickness of the boards that I used to have, and then I put one thinner strip in here, and then I also added these above what's going to be the vertical table, just so I can have some extra clamping force. So if I'm doing something small, I can do a small piece over here. So the larger piece here is still going to give me the workspace of what I had on my old machine, plus some. So now I'm going to go ahead and go through and do the boring part of screwing all these down and countersinking them, and then we're going to go ahead and get this thing leveled. One thing to remember when you're putting all these down, not only do you want to use that self-guiding bit, but you're also going to want to countersink these down in, which is what I like to use this for. And I like to put my screws down where the head of the screw is about halfway through these boards. That way you're still getting good downward force, but then you can get probably at 2 resurfaces before you ever have to worry about getting too close to those screws. So gonna get back out of here, probably take me about 45 minutes or so to get all these put down, and then we're gonna go ahead and run a leveling pass. So I just came through with some 400 grit and my palm sander, and I just kind of went through and really lightly sanded over this just to make sure everything's nice and clean. And one thing I'm really happy with is 0.02, I was able to get that all in one pass. I don't have any big ridges, nothing I'm worried about. Everything came out nice and clean, which definitely lets me know my table is nice and level, which I'm really happy with that. And I don't have any like big gouges or anything going the other direction, so I think my tramming is okay. I still have to order the tool to do the tramming, but I'm gonna do my first couple projects without it and keep my fingers crossed that it's all just gonna work out. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to jump in Vectric, and I'm going to do a little bit different clamping system on this one that I've seen a couple other guys do, mainly the guy that does Broinwood, who does like inlay CNC machine cutting boards. And if you haven't looked at his stuff, I tell you the guy is just absolutely amazing. So I'm going to do a similar clamp down method that he has all along the front of the machine and down the side of this machine, so I know I always have a positive corner. Now this corner over here where I'm going to have my vertical table, I'm still going to have to kind of make sure that my vertical table is perfectly square. I might end up having to do some shims or whatnot to kind of make it all fit, but that'll be for another time. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this finished up here so we can get our first project and get it all carved out. Okay, so now that we have these all installed, I grabbed one of my squares. We're just going to make sure everything is perfect here. Now I know it is, and I'm going to show you how I know, but we're going to go ahead and just show this here. So we've got perfectly square along here. Because you built it in your software, as long as you built it properly, you know this will be perfectly square. So this is how I built it. Just going to give you a real quick rundown of what I did. So the first thing I did here, I don't know if this is going to show up or not, I'm going to get you up close here, is I designed my actual layout of my table here. So this is what I used for the actual leveling the table. So I put all my screw holes, and then this is my T-track, so I kind of know exactly what it's going to look like here. So if I zoom in, the first thing I did was measure where I wanted the first stop and the second one, and then I just ran a line from the center of that straight up and a line all the way over and just made sure that they meet right here at a 90. So now I know I have a perfect square. So as it cuts all of these, even if my table isn't perfectly square, these will all be perfectly square because it's built that way in the software. So use that if you're building one of your tables. Well, thanks for joining me for another video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give a thumbs up. Feel free to share. If you have any questions or comments about the machine, how I built anything at all, please put that down below. I'll do what I can to answer them for you. If you really enjoyed this, you want to join me for all my other projects, all my other adventures, consider hitting that subscribe button. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around.